further into the copyright protection afforded to software, and look at obviously literal and non-literal copying. So we're going to look at copyright infringement basics, and of course one way to define what copyright protection is for software is, or what does copyright protect in software, is also to look at when there's an infringement. So that's a way to define the scope of copyright protection is through the infringement cases. So we're going to look at the copyright infringement basics in copyright in general, and then we're going to apply them to the literal copying in software and the non-literal copying in software. And then we're going to have some policy discussion about what's the level of protection afforded by copyright, and whether that's enough, and whether something needs to be changed, or what are the various options to, or whether it's actually fine the way it is. Before we go into that, I'll just draw your attention to a talk by one of our former students. I don't know if you've been made aware of that. So on February the 9th, there's Neve is going to present a talk about her career as an entertainment lawyer. So I thought maybe some of you in this class, it's related to tech. It's more about her job is mostly to check documentaries, movies before they are released, to see whether there's no problem with privacy or any kind of other copyright infringement and stuff like that. So she works in a law firm, and her work is to pre-check or check works to make sure that they comply with all the different IP, IT, freedom of expression requirements, privacy requirements. And so that will be a very interesting talk about her career and what she would advise you to do. So if you're interested in entertainment law, then that might be an interesting talk. So February the 9th, and you can book, so you go on the website and there's a link to Eventbrite to book a place. Okay, so we're going to start with something we didn't have time to do last time, which is some research and essay writing tips. One of them is so I had asked you about reference management software last week, about which one of those are free software, which one of those are proprietary software, and which one of those are open source software. So there was 3 reference management software I had asked you to look at, so EndNote, Mendeley, and Zotero. Now I have a question for you to figure out who actually uses reference management software, who has heard of them, and who, before we go into a bit more of the details of that. So let's switch C. Let's see. Display. All. So there's events. So it's to figure out, because in every kind of course that I teach, I want to mention those reference management software, because it might be, I realize that not a lot of people know about them, and they're quite useful. I know they help me quite a lot, because I'm not super organized, and the previous system I had for my resources and sources and stuff was not really efficient, and this kind of helped me also for the citation when writing an essay. But So we have 20 people on. So it's sample already. Okay, so let's see. The first question was which reference management software do you use, if any? Okay, so most of you do not use any kind of reference management software. So Zotero is the one I use, and Mendeley I know a bit about, EndNote, nobody uses it. That's the one that is supported by a university. Okay, so meaning that if you have an issue, so let's talk about the question I asked you. So which one is free? So which one is proprietary? Which ones are proprietary in those ones? So software that you can't change, can't modify.
EndNote.
Yeah, EndNote. So you have to use EndNote, you have to pay a license to use it, and you can't change it. Mendeley is free to use, but it's also proprietary. And Zotero is open source, so it's free to use. And you can change it if you want to. Another software, which other software people use? I mean, there's one person who says they're using another reference management software. Or maybe it's an error. I know only those three. Okay, so for those of you who don't use, which is the majority, I'll just show quickly what's the point of that. We'll see, I'll try to do escape. Okay. So let's try. I'll try to do a demo, but it's not that easy. Let me see. So first I have to change the same thing. Duplicate, multiply. No. Okay, so we should see changes. Okay. Escape. No. Changes. Okay. So there's the software. So on the right is the content management software. Okay, which is in this case Zotero. And there's the course. Okay, so I go in the course, and as you know, there's a list of resources linked to the reading list, basically. So I give an example. So in this week's reading list, I'll go in there and link to that article. So it was, really down the further reading list. Okay, so I click on that, view article. Okay, dismiss. So there's the article in full. Okay, so now look at what happens on right-hand side on the Zotero software. So I go there, here, I click on that, okay, and then I have the resource here downloaded, okay, with the PDF and all the information, let's see, full, okay, all the information, dates, so it's all sorted out, and then of course it's searchable. And so to give another example, let's go on BBC News, let's go news, technology, so whatever, something that is might be relevant. Yeah, Neuralink. Okay. So there's the story, the Neuralink thing about Elon Musk. I do that, and then there's the information that comes in my software, right? And then what I can do, so that's the kind of the basic stuff, to have all your information, all your sources in one place with all the PDF. But actually, I guess most of you now just go on the databases. How many of you actually download the stuff? Or do you read it straight on the... Do you download the PDFs or keep a... Yeah, no?
I download it if I can, but obviously in like Cortex you can't download it.
Yeah, Cortex, so that's kind of the best case scenario where it works, but there's a lot of stuff where it doesn't work that well and you have to do it manually. And Cortex, yeah, you can do copy and paste. That's kind of copyright infringement, so I would not recommend doing that. But some of the sources you can download and put in this system, or you can create the database yourself. Let me see. And then the benefit of that is so once you have to write something, okay, so let's do that. Let's put that there. Let's say I want to say Lee, so the author says patents are good. Patents are good. Okay. And go 0. Let's say add citation. Okay, I choose which style I want to cite in. So which is the recommended style for the University of Edinburgh, the law school? What style do we recommend that you use in any kind of essay?
Scholar.
A scholar, okay. So a scholar. Okay, so I choose a scholar. Okay. I choose the article by Lee, and I put the page number 456. Okay. And it creates the footnote in the style that is compatible, the scholar style. Okay. Then I say BBC talks about Musk. Okay, add citation. I do this one, and then I say Lee says Musk is stupid, which he doesn't say, but creates another citation. Say Lee, he does that on page 700. Okay, and then at the bottom you have the cross-reference. So it does. So I'll put it in. Okay, so it does the cross-referencing. Okay, and then it updates whenever you add some. So it says Lee, not one. Okay, so it does that. So it's quite good, quite potentially efficient, but yes, I just point out that there are those kind of tools. Yes, so I use Zotero, but you don't have to use that one. You can use EndNote and Mendeley. Let's see, I'm going to go back to the settings. Extend. Okay. Changes. Okay. So, quick demo. Yes, fine. So, okay. So yeah, so that. So it's quite good. It centralizes all your information, your data. You create an entry in there, and it's there searchable. So all the information that you have, in the PDF, you can search it in the software itself. You can make notes. Okay, so you write stuff as you read the content. So it's a good system to manage your resources. It can do the footnotes for you, okay, which is good, but also it's bad in the sense that you don't learn how to follow the Scholar, the Blue Book, the Australian Guide to Citation, the Canadian, the McGill Guide. So I forget often the rules of citation because I'm so dependent on the software. So it's not ideal. And also the thing you'll find is that it doesn't work for a lot of doesn't work as well for a lot of primary sources. So some cases and stuff, it's a bit more fiddly because those software were not designed with lawyers in mind, and we have kind of a special way to do things, which is a bit finicky and OCD and all that. So, should you use one? I would say, as a reference database, yes. So to collect information, to have all your information in one place. As a citation tool, I would say if you're in year 4 and writing your final dissertation and you've done all your studies without a reference management tool, I would say don't do it. Okay, because you've gone all that way and it's more risk than potential benefit. Maybe if you year 3, maybe if you want to do masters or PhD later on or any kind of research, that's kind of useful to have. So yes, reference tool. As I said, so there's 3 of them. The only that is officially supported is the EndNote one. A lot of people use either Zotero and Mendeley. It's not supported, meaning that if it's not a valid excuse to say after submission deadline, oh, I had a problem with my Zotero stuff, okay, or Mendeley. So that's why I'm not recommended using it to write, for instance, a dissertation or an essay. Now we're in semester 2, so if you've been able to do it without it, don't use it for citations. There are some horror stories about stuff disappearing, though that was more 10 years ago when those were still in development. But yes, just a word of caution. I'll put the slides up with links to library information about those types of software. We're going to go back to them, and especially Zotero and Mendeley, when we look at open source licensing. So it's just a tip to help you with your research management and resources management. And then citing, if you feel confident, you might try, but as I said, at your own risks. Okay. Copyright infringement basics. We're going to focus on primary infringement, secondary infringement. I'm just going to mention a bit later, but in passing. So, in infringement procedure, what does the claimant have to show to win an infringement case? What are the 3 main things they have to establish? So they have to show one that there is that the defendant had carried out an activity which fall within the copyright owner's control. Okay, so as copyright says, the copyright owner is the only one who has the right to copy the work, or to license it, or to adapt it, translate it, and so on. So you have to be able to establish that. Two, that there is a causal connection between the defendant's work and the initial copyrighted work, or the follow-up copyrighted work. And three, the restricted act was carried out in relation to the work or a substantial part of the work. Which of those do you think is the most difficult to establish those points? Yeah?
Number 3, establishing the substantial part.
Yeah, whether it's the whole part, so when it's the whole part, that's kind of straightforward, but usually you can find that in some of the literal protection. But yes, what we mean by substantial part is also quite tricky. So probably of those three, the hardest is the third one. 2 is can be quite tricky, the causal connection. We're going to look into that in a bit more detail. So the restricted activities, I just put a slide up with section 16.1 of the CDPA. Just a reminder of all the powers that the copyright owner have over their work. We're going to look into that in a bit more detail when we look at licensing and assignment of copyright. So that's just a reminder. Now, causal connection is establishing that the defendant's work is derived from the claimant's work. So why is that tricky to do? Or what does we've mentioned that before, but what does the requirement doesn't allow to protect against? And it's the difference between copyright and patents. So, yeah?
Copyright protects expression of ideas as opposed to ideas themselves.
Okay.
So, for example, in the context of software, there's no such, if you have look and feel infringement, it's not in your case would be harder to establish because they're causal connections harder to prove.
Yeah, the causal connection is harder to prove, and the fact that there's a requirement of causal connection, what does it prevent? So you have to establish that the two works are, one work is the copy of another. Okay? So it's a kind of a high burden to prove that, to establish that. And if you can't establish that, copyright allows for quite similar works to emerge independently. Okay? So you could have, as we discussed, and that's the difference with patents, whereby when you have a patent, it's a strong right that allows you to protect the idea or the invention against an independent creation that happens after that. So copyright allows for independent creations. To go against that, you have to establish that there's a link between the two works. Okay, so it's a kind of a high burden. So copyright does not protect against independent creation. Go quickly on the let's see. So, how can you establish direct evidence of a causal connection? How do you, do you find instances where, or what are the difficulties in establishing that there is a link between two works? What will you look at? What would be, the slam dunk establishing that there is a link between two works beyond doubt? You have, one claimant that admits that they've copied, or defendant admits that he copied. You can imagine some kind of proof. For instance, some evidence that someone was told or asked to copy a work, an ex-employee, for instance, saying, an ex-employee from a company, the boss of the new company, the new employer says, can you transcribe the copyrights that you, or the code that you produce for the former employees? So there's that aspect, and there is the you can have a witness that sees somebody copying the work or getting the work and then copying it. But basically, it's kind of difficult to establish. The case of the ex-employee is something that we've seen a lot, or we see a lot in the literal copying, in the cases of literal copying of software, as we're going to discuss. Basically, the direct evidence of copying is often hard to get. Okay? And so, how do the court establish copyright infringement in the absence of such direct evidence? What do they do to counter the fact that often this evidence is really hard to establish? Yeah, connection, inference. So they look at different type of evidence to try to infer the connection between one work and the other. The fact that one work is copied from the other, and so the claimant will try to establish that there are so much similarities between the two works that they must have been copied from one from the other. And that's a matter for the court then to decide. And it's for the claimant to establish. So the burden of proof is on the claimant. And the more similarities, or also the context, so the more similarities, the less likely the court will consider the work independently conceived. And then if there is inference of copying, then it's for the defendant to establish that they have proved or they have created the work independently. So it is kind of, yes, often quite hard work, but when the court assesses all the different factors that come in. Again, this, especially in software, we'll see that the employee, ex-employee cases are so prevalent in software because those are quite easy to establish the link between the original work and the allegedly copied work. The fact that the employee was with one company, often he or she was the designer, and then come to another company, create a very similar work, sometimes code on the original work. That makes it easier. It's kind of connection. The causal link is a bit easier to establish. So I'll put that up. Okay, so you have to establish a connection between the two work, causal link, and then it has to be copied of the work or a substantial part of the work, and that's indeed a bit more tricky. So you have literal reproduction, verbatim copy. They are easy to identify. It's not that common that you have verbatim copies. I shouldn't say that because a lot of the piracy campaigns and the issue in the early 2000s about protection of software were about verbatim copies of the code. Either object code or source code. That's quite easy to identify if there's an exact copy. And we're going to see why. But it's not enough. You have to have a reproduction of a substantial part of the work. So if you copy a small part exactly, then that's not often enough. You're going to see it depends what constitutes a substantial part depends on the work itself, and we're going to see that there's a problem about the definition of substantial part. So how is substantial part defined or applied or applied or defined? What are the criteria to establish whether a copy of a work is enough of a copying to establish infringement? So going back to I guess the key question, one of the key questions is there's two questions, the idea expression dichotomy. Okay, so if you are up to a point where you only copy, you can't protect the idea itself, and also there's the question as to whether the assessment of substantial part is a qualitative or quantitative test. So is it about the amount of stuff you copy, or is it about the quality of the stuff you copy? What do you think is the main criteria? Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I think it's a mix of both because I think Arnold J. mentioned in SAS Institute that in determining the substantiality of infringement, you need to focus on what had been reproduced and consider whether it expressed the former work's author's intellectual creation. So I think it's a mix of both qualitative and quantitative.
Yes, because So the test, usually the court says it's qualitative more than quantitative. But at the same time, so the qualitative thing is kind of a key issue. The problem with this test is that we get closer to getting protection of an idea. So when you look at, we want to establish whether there's a copy. We look at the quality of the work and whether one copies the other. It's not about quantity, it's about the essence of the work in a sense. And so if you go into look at the essence of the work, you're getting closer to copying or protecting actually the idea behind the work. So there's a fine line to draw, and you see the courts struggled with that. Because also we have the InfoPact decision whereby there was only 11 words were considered to be enough to be original and to reflect the personality of the author and therefore to be protected. So there is a risk in assessing the qualitative elements that you go too far into protecting more than just the expression, but also the idea. So that's a potential problem. So, yeah. So just a quick word that also the test is applied differently depending on the type of work. We're going to focus on the literary work, so that's the one that the software falls under. And you've seen in reading this the Da Vinci case. That is one of the main cases in the literary infringement cases, and that is being used or referred to in software cases. Basically, in that case, the author of the Da Vinci Code, Dan Brown, right, was accused of having stolen or copied information from a previous book, right? And what the judge found was that the Da Vinci Code had used the ideas that were found in the other book, okay, but just the ideas, not the expression of the ideas. And therefore the court says, well, this is not what copyright law is about. Dan Brown has used information that was available elsewhere on top of that, which was fine for everybody to use, and basically they didn't find there was some copyright infringement in there. So so in that case, so the claimant said they copied my work, and the court says no, actually they just looked at some the ideas behind the work, and they copied those abstract ideas, or Dan Brown used those abstract ideas in the work, and therefore those themes and ideas and facts even, they cannot be protected by copyright. Okay, so that was a case where the court found that there was not enough expression in the allegedly infringing work to find infringement. Okay, just another literary case. Guthrie v. Robbie Williams, so a case on music lyrics. Again, we're talking about text, and that's the most relevant type of work in terms of software, because as you'll see, as we've seen the comparisons between the lines of code. So there's two songs. So Robbie Williams writes this song in '98, Jesus in the Camper Van, and the owners of the I Am the Way song say there is infringement. So I'm going to ask you to read. So start with the I Am the Way in New York Town. So that's just part of the lyrics. But it says, so the first one says, every son of God gets a little hard luck sometimes, 3 times. Okay, especially when he goes saying he is the way. And then you have the song by Robbie Williams. I think he was co-writer of the song, which says, I suppose even the Son of God gets it hard sometime, especially when he goes around saying, I am the way. And this is repeated, and then the first 2 lines are repeated 3 times. Okay, so looking at those, so that's how copyright infringement cases are decided. So you look at the 2 texts side by side. Do you think there is infringement or not? So I'm going to try to do that. Let's see. Infringement or not, and so you still see that. I'll put that up here and see whether you think there is infringement in that case or not. Maybe I shouldn't show the... Do you see the results? Yeah, you see exactly the same thing. You see that on your laptop? Okay, so not too different. So you don't see who has voted for what? No. Okay. Let's see how many people... Okay. Yeah, because if you see the results in live, maybe it influences your result. Okay, so most people say it doesn't infringe, and a third says it does. So, what do you think was the decision? So when you went to court, so most people think there is no infringement, and so the decision was there was infringement. So the minority was the right. So that's the case. Blue Music versus Robbie Williams, and he found that it was copyrighted. He found that it was copyright infringement. It was found that Jesus in Camper took its centrality from the other work, but it was a kind of that makes it difficult, because when you reach judgment, you think, okay, well, is that going too much into protecting the idea rather than the expression? Okay, they looked at the lyrics and thought, okay, there is similarity there, but you could say that the court maybe, you could argue, tipped too much into protecting the idea rather than the expression, which it should be doing. There's another interesting element in this case that you see a lot in the music cases, especially with sampling, when people sue people who sample their music without authorization. What had happened in this case, and that's linked to the causal connection thing, is that Robbie Williams had asked a license to the owner of the music beforehand, and the owner of the music said no, or rather they say, we want 50% of what you make on this song. Okay? And so, and Robbie Williams said no, and did it anyway. And so there was, in that case, it was quite easier to establish the causal link, okay, because you had evidence of, knowledge of the original work. Okay, so that played a part. So you see that a lot. There was a group called, a tribe called Quest, who wanted to sample some music from, I don't remember who, but they asked for the licensing, and the licensing was exorbitant. And so they did the sample anyway, and then of course they lost the case, and they had to pay, I think 100% of all the money they made on that particular song, and they had to pay to the original owner of the sample. Okay, so yes, secondary infringements. We're not going to look into that in great detail. Okay. Okay, literal copy. So that's where the main, kind of basic principle. Those cases that show is to argue that it is quite difficult to establish. First, actual copying. What substantial part mean? The idea expression dichotomy. In principle, it's very clear. Then, when you have a qualitative assessment of what a substantial part is, then it gets a bit more tricky, because you go towards the looking at protecting the idea than just the expression. So, as we've established, a lot of the core principles in copyright are a bit vague, flimsy, and not entirely sure, and that's why we need lawyers and judges until we get replaced by AI. But yes, tricky, and that difficulties goes into the world of software. Looking at, so I have a question for you about, and then we'll take a break. So, looking at, so in copyright you have code, okay, so you have lines of code, pages of code, so source code mostly. What is the best way to establish infringement? Or let's put it in another context. Let's say you are marking an essay, right? And you are looking for fraud, as we are, and you have two essays that look very similar, but to the point where it is potentially troubling and needs to requires your marker to look into more detail. What would be the telltale signs that two works, or one work, is the copy of the other? Yeah?
Like if the exact same error is made.
Yes, so exact same errors. That's a good way to establish copying. And that was pointed out in one case by Lord Hoffman. He was not Lord then. So, yes, he pointed out that often it is the little resemblance, stuff that is not essential, let's say, to the story, or he points out the fact that errors, if you have in two works, you have the same errors, then I see that sometimes, especially in footnotes, when you have the same error or footnote are not consistent throughout. You say, okay, why is there a change there? Kind of a bit, yes, draws your attention on the differences. Okay, and knowing that, again, putting on your kind of Machiavellian hat, or kind of a bit devious, but a bit, knowing that, if you produce copyrighted work, what would you be tempted to do to be able later on to establish copyright infringement? Or to, yes, you produce copyrighted work, so it could be a piece of software, it could be anything, it could be a map, it could be a phone book. What could you be tempted to do as an insurance policy to be able to establish infringement? That has been done in one case, the first case established in the US. There was one case where it was about a phone book, and basically the company that produced the phone book had entries in the phone book that were deliberately wrong. Okay, so they put wrong information in the phone book, so that if somebody copies and sold the phone book, they would then establish and say, well, how come the other phone book has the same exact mistakes in there? So there is a bit of potentially shenanigans going on. Let's take up until 10 past 12. We can stop for a bit. I'll start the register. Once we wait for so Alexandre, Shanley,
Here.
here, Erin, Samuel, yeah. Ingrid, Gemma, Skylar, Katrina, Jennifer, Alex Fenner, Patricia,
Here.
Natasha, she's here. Ewan is here. Eddie, yeah. Stephanie. Erin, Erin Morrison. Lois. Zalan. Muskan. Victor is here. Dom is here. He's just coming in. Nathan, James. And 11 is here. Okay. So, Alex, no, we go Alex for now. Okay, so this this finding or this point made by Hoffman in this case was used in other cases, including one that is the most relevant to literal copying software, which obviously. So, which one of the questions I asked is which are the most relevant cases in the literal copying of software? So, possibly 3 cases that are the most relevant. Any of those? I mean, as we said, a lot of them are in the field of employee relationship, which we're going to look into a bit more detail next week when we look at NDAs and the like and co-authorship. So, any of what are the so when there's questions of copying literally the literal code being copied, transferred by a former employee, so where the causal connection is quite easy to establish. What are some of those cases? Yeah, Navitaire is it's a bit more non-literal. The non-literal application of the copying. So Navitaire is an important case in the UK history of the software. Some more, former partners in a company. Yeah.
The IPCOS case.
Yeah, IPCOS case is one of the important one where they found actual infringement. So a former employee created a similar software in another company, and they found that there was enough of substantial copying of the previous software. Another kind of case where they in part used the finding, or they established that there was similar errors and similar errors in the code that helped establish some form of infringement. There was not total infringement, but there was some. So it was an interesting decision because it was kind of both sides kind of won some aspects of the case. So, yeah.
Is it Cantor Fitzgerald?
Yes.
International?
Yeah, it's Cantor v. Fitzgerald. Okay, and the last one of the main ones that were in the reading list, so it's the Coward v. Festos, I don't know how to pronounce it, which was also significant. So yeah, in the Cantor case, they looked at the code and they found errors that were indicative of copying. So some of the copyright claims were successful because of that. So you have, those are mostly employee cases. You have other measures. So from the point of view of the user, you as a user of software, especially if you're a business, you might want to infringe on copyright and try to get the whole software to work for your company, or the whole video game to work on your computer without paying for it. So that requires you to have a full copy of the whole system to make it work on your own computer. And that's, of course, that's problematic if there's that source code or that object code gets in the world and gets shared. What are the kind of technical measures that you can use as a software producer to prevent that from happening? So that is from your code to being copied. Are there kind of measures that you've encountered yourself as users? Yeah.
Like a product activation key.
Yeah, product activation key, and what is the kind of the concept? What is the system that allows this activation key to be effective? So you have to activate your product, and what does that kind of product, or how does that work basically? How does the activation key stuff works? So you download a piece of program, or rather you want to install a piece of program, you need an activation key. So let's say Microsoft can check that the version of your program is software is a legitimate one, creates an account for you, you activate the product, and that product is linked to you. And then you make sure, or Microsoft makes sure that you pay to be able to use the software. Now, in terms of general, can you, or has anybody tried to copy music from YouTube or Spotify? I mean, people are looking at me and say, why would you do that? But that was something that was quite popular 20 years ago, trying to get, I mean, in the old times was having music on a CD, copying it on a digital form, and then putting it on, sharing it on peer-to-peer programs, right? How would you, as a producer of that music, that video game, that movie, how would you try to prevent that from happening? So from preventing one format or copyrighted work on a format being transferred into another format.
Do you like encrypt it in some way so that it can't be read by other formats?
Yes. Yeah.
I know from personal experience of trying to screen record just a clip of something on Netflix, just send someone, and I did it, and then you look at it, and it's just blank. It's sort of somehow encrypted the software. It doesn't let it happen.
Yes. So you have those systems that are called digital rights management systems or technical protection measures. So in the software, in the product that you're trying to access, there is software that is there to prevent you from copying the content, right? And that's something that's quite. So yes, I've had that before, because sometimes, as you've seen, I show clips, video clips in class, and so to do that, I would have. In the olden days, I would have a DVD and I would have tried to copy the content of it, or for the music, and they would put software in the product to prevent me from doing that. Okay, so they're called digital rights management system. And James, because I've tried to do that on Netflix a few times. So you stream the Netflix show you want to copy, and you have a software. So I use OBS.
Was that to try and copy the software?
Or trying to copy what's being streamed on your computer, because that's what happens, right? You had the Netflix show, it's a Netflix show. You wanted to record it, and then so it looked like it was recording, and then in the end, the file you have doesn't have anything on it. So I've tried that. I know that I probably shouldn't say that, but if you do that with OBS on an open source platform, it used to work. So if you use that on Apple and Windows, you can't do it. But on an open source platform on Linux, I was able to do it. So you have those systems that are there to prevent you from copying the content. Those systems, those digital rights management systems, they're also known as technological protection measure. It's a specific provision in copyright law that was introduced in '96 to prevent you from circumventing them. So if you try to remove those digital rights management system, you can be prosecuted for copyright infringement. So even if you don't copy the actual content, just the fact that you try to breach those DRMs is in itself a copyright infringement. Okay, so you have an extra layer of protection. Yeah?
Is it really the infringement itself, or is it an attempt at infringement?
I think potentially an attempt, but I think that it hasn't been prosecuted because they're busy prosecuting the people who have actually done it, right? But I think attempt to, well, then it gets a bit more tricky because you can go into this. There is a debate as to why you attempt to break the DRMs, because there is an exception that is if it's for research, you might be able to get away with it. Right? But that's kind of tricky, and it depends on jurisdiction. In the US, you have an exception, meaning you can do research in cryptography, in locks, and try to break the DRMs. But in principle, if you break the DRMs, then you are potentially in trouble.
You can also fragment the video files, so you could, for like example, they prevent like directly downloading the entire MP4 or whatever file that they have.
Yeah, you can fragment it. I mean, there's a lot of different measures that have been used to try to prevent the copying of copyrighted works of software, video games especially. Now, if you're into video games, that's the only. I mean, 20 years ago there was a lot of problem in music because those kind of software didn't really work properly, those DRMs, and so there was privacy issues, cybersecurity threats, and more importantly, they would prevent you from enjoying the work. Now they tend to work a lot better, so you don't even notice them until you try to copy some stuff, which is kind of the point. So you have those in Spotify, every app on every kind of platform, Apple, Android, they have a digital rights management system, and for the most part, you don't really see them. The main field where there are issues with them is video games. So every 3 or 4 times a year, you have a big game that has problems because the digital rights management system make it problematic for people who have paid for the game to use it. Okay, so in the past few months, Capcom, who does Resident Evil and another game, they've introduced digital rights management system. Those digital rights management systems have been problematic. They've prevented people to modify the game, which they were designed to do, or to copy the game, which they were designed to do, but also created issues for legitimate users. Okay, so you have so another one from last week. So yes. So you have those efforts to prevent piracy. Okay, so just a quick. I don't know if people have been familiar with the FACT organization. If you go to the movies in the UK, you will have probably seen a kind of warning saying if you're a cinema, you have a warning from FACT saying if you try to record a movie in a movie theater. They have infrared cameras that are meant to spot you and prevent you from doing that. So that's more, or to change. They go after peer-to-peer networks and the likes. In the field of software, you have this FAST, Federation Against Software Theft, that also go into quite a bit of efforts to prosecute and try to prevent theft of software. Okay, so just former employees. So these were examples of where it was quite straightforward. You had a copy of the code, so the whole code or bits of it enough, a substantial part of it enough that there is potential infringement. Now the more tricky aspect is in terms of copying a software, but not a literal copy of the software. So I'll give you an example, again in the video game industry, and I'll ask you to compare them and see whether there is infringement or not. So on the left you have the first game. So as you can see from the graphics, it's kind of very dated. And on the other one, the new game. So people on the left say, well, this is a copy of our game. So that's one of the frames that was used. The other comparison in court where, yes, so you had in the original game, you had a level, so to play the game, you have pool, you have to adjust the strength of your, I guess you say strike, or how do you say in pool when you, strike? So you had a way to assess, how strong your strike would be, and so they compared, the minimum power. So as you put more strength into your strike, the colors become more and more. It starts with yellow, then orange, then red to put more strength in your action. And the other on the right, quite a similar system where when the power is low, it's yellow, and when the power is strong, it's red. So you can adjust your your strike. What I have see. So let's see that question. So infringement or no infringement. I'll put it back up again. So is the first one infringing, well, is the second one infringing the first one? Okay, so 38. Okay, so So the case was Nova Production versus Mizuma, and in the end, the court found there was no infringement. Okay, so the answer is no infringement, because again the idea expression dichotomy. So first, the court established that there was no literal infringement, and that was not contested. And the court looked at the different components and said, well, actually those are, the way the, for instance, the pool table is shaped and looks. A lot of it is technical in the sense that there's only so many ways you can represent a pool table, right? And then the court said, for the other elements, so I only showed the element I thought were the two most contentious, I'd say. Because on the face, when you look at them, especially the second one, okay, I was a bit surprised, but not too much. It's just to say that this, in the UK courts, there is a strong push towards, trying to have a really being careful when adjudicating on non-literal reproduction. There's a tendency or a willingness not to protect ideas, so that is not to give too much leeway to the copyright protection, so that it goes extend to the protection of ideas. I thought, looking at and if you look at the case, so on cases, we're going to discuss that a bit later. So that's the case of the Court of Appeal. Okay, so it's not the first instance. So the final decision is the one of the Court of Appeal. But if you want to find the more discussion on the facts and examples, so the slides I showed you before, that stuff, I found in the High Court decision. Okay, so if you want to have, in any case, and that's general across jurisdiction, the first instance courts would give you more details about and give you more annexes and information, whereas the Court of Appeal is more about the application of the law, so it's that, and same with the Supreme Court. So just a tip, if you like, if you want to really understand the case, it's sometimes useful to go and look at the lower court case. I thought about asking you to read the lower case, but I think it's 100 pages long, so I'm not sure it would have been, productive to spend all that time on that. So yes, the Nova case is one important case on this saga of software, looking at non-literal copying, and in that case, it's just these are general concept of how the game of pool is played and how the game of pool can be translated into video game format. There's not enough of the expression that has been copied to find infringement. Now the other big case that I ask you to look at is the SIS Institute saga. And I had asked you to look at the chronology of the case. I have a question for you on that. So it's a long case. It's been going on has been going on for quite some time. It involves both the there's a reference to the ECJ, and then another decision by the local court. So just to kind of a recap of how EU law works and EU cases work. That kind of framework can apply to most cases, whether they are from the UK or other jurisdiction. Minutes. Okay, so some correct answers. Hmm, 13% correct. So, yes. So the cases start there, what is that? Sorry? The High Court, okay, so the first instance. Then what happened?
It got referred to the CGU.
Okay, so the CGAUs, so the High Court in England says, okay, this is where how I think the case should go, but they say, oh, we're not entirely sure about how the software directives should be interpreted, right? So they ask for guidance to the CGAU. Okay, so maybe a lot of you got it wrong between those two there. Let's see. So what happened next? So when you put a case to the CGAU, your national court, you're not entirely sure how EU law should be interpreted. EU law that has been transposed in your national law. So you send a set of questions to the European Court. What happened next then? Yeah?
The Advocate General gives their opinion on the status of their sort of expertise.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's something that's quite kind of French and German, I guess. Not very much common law stuff, but basically in the courts you have one person, it's not always, that is in charge of looking at the case or looking at the questions and kind of doing all the homework for the court, and presenting what they think the answer should be, right? This opinion is not binding, so the court can disregard the opinion. They can reach the same conclusion but with a different reasoning. Okay, so it's just a way to give yes. So usually the opinion of the Advocate General are longer, more detailed, and then the judgment, then you have a decision by the CJAU, would say, would look at the question sent by the National Court, look at the opinion, and then provide an answer. The answer goes back to the National Court, okay, the court that had asked the question. So in this case, the High Court. The High Court looks at the answer, applies the answer as much as they can. Okay, and what's the last bit there? So the High Court makes a decision, and then, yeah.
I think in this case they appeal to the Court of Appeal, but they just wrote in the decision of the High Court.
Yeah, so basically one of the parties, in this case the claimants, said, we're not happy by the way the High Court applied the law, including the way they interpreted the High Court decision, the CGEU decision, and then they appealed the decision and made basically a finding, and the Court of Appeal agreed with the original decision, so the appeal was rejected. There could be one more step in that saga, not this particular one, but another one. What would be the other avenues for one of the parties to challenge what has been decided in the UK system?
Supreme Court.
Yeah, the Supreme Court would be one way to extend the saga. Okay, so there was a series. So I had a series of questions for you about this case. I don't feel you're very. I mean, week 1, week 2, you seemed a bit more prepared and active. I don't know, maybe it's getting a bit too technical, or yeah, you have to tell me also to see what I can change. It might also be something to do with something else, but yeah, what were the question? What was at stake in this? I don't have to give all the questions because there was 8 or 9 questions that the English court asked. Yeah.
Can I say what the Advocate General's sort of summary?
Yes.
So it was the defined scope of the legal protection conferred by copyright on computer programs, which was under the European Directive, and whether the functionalities of a computer program and the program language is protected under copyright by Article 1, Subsection 2 of the Directive as well.
So the AJ said the technical aspects, the language, the idea behind the program, the functionalities of the program, what is determined by the technical aspects of a particular problem cannot be protected by copyright under the software directive. Basically, the ECJ or the CGEU, I think it was, because I got confused because do you know when the ECJ became the CGEU? I always get confused, sometimes I get it wrong, around 2010. So I think that was one of the first decision where it was called the CGEU. And so basically the court followed the opinion of the Advocate General and gave a very, I think limited interpretation of what could be protected by copyright, which was actually what the High Court had pretty much said. What the High Court also so the High Court was quite happy with the decision or the findings of the CGEU. The High Court was, however, a bit critical, saying that and you find sometimes that happening, that is, one of the member state court ask a question to the CGEU, or a series of questions. Sometimes the CGEU compresses those questions into a more limited amount of questions, and sometimes the CGEU decides not to answer the questions, or answers them in a non-clear way, or purposely avoids answering the question. And in that case, if you read I don't remember whether it was the Court of Appeal, I think it was in the Court of Appeal that said, we get the general message, but it would have been nice to have proper answers to all the questions we asked. So it's kind of, I'm going to try to find it, let's see, do I have it there? Let's see if we can find it. It was in, sure, let's see. I don't remember by heart. This is Institute. Names and Wales CA by me. Let's see, hopefully you'll find it. It's this one. And if you look at, yes, paragraph 4, they say, so there was disagreement. Unfortunately, the court could not agree what the CGEU had actually decided. The language in which the court expressed its judgment was at the time disappointingly compressed, if not obscure. Moreover, although the judge had referenced specific interpretation to the CGEU refrained from answering them, instead said its own paraphrase. So I like it when, there's a bit of there's a bit of not chicanery, but yes, when the national judge kind of look at the answer they get and are quite upfront by saying it could have been better, and you find that quite a lot. Usually from it depends, but countries where the judicial system is quite robust and where the UK courts are quite upfront and quite frank in saying you could have done better here, and vice versa. So it's quite I like it when there is a bit of tension between the courts. No, I don't like it, but I like it when it's highlighted that there is an issue, because when you look at the CGEU decision as an individual, you might say, well, I don't really get all of that, and it's reassuring when you see a court, especially the Court of Appeal or Supreme Court, saying, well, actually, we don't really understand what was said, so or not all of it anyway. So interesting, but cutting it short, so the SAS Institute saga is important in European law because it establishes, if there was a need to, that technical aspects, functionality, language could not infringe. There was a finding of infringement in the manuals, so there was a bit of the manuals on how to use the software that were similar, and so there was some kind of finding, but for the rest, it was pretty much non-infringing. So the question is there, what does that mean for copyright protection and software, what kind of level of protection do you get thanks to copyright if you are a software producer or developer, or it could be an individual company, and is there a need for more protection? Because we've seen cases, the Mazuma case, the pool game, SAS. So unless you are really copying a lot of the code, verbatim, then that's you done. So unless it's piracy, there is a limited amount of, there is some protection, but quite potentially limited. Is that a good thing or not? So that's the kind of stuff in essays that the essay question will be designed around that theme. That is, I will ask you a question that has policy implications, where you will ask to say what the status of something is, and whether it's good or bad, and how to make it better. Okay, so that's basically those kind of policy discussion are framed around what an essay could be. So how would you go about answering that? So you would be asked to comment on a piece of on a legal question. You will have to give me what the current status is, and then comment on whether the status quo as it is a good thing or not, and how to make it better. So, in the case of the protection afforded by copyright, what would you say? Is it an accurate protection, or is it an efficient protection? What kind of criteria would you use to establish whether it's a good system or not?
Maybe you can see like what rights the author or the owner of the copyright has, and like to what extent the protection actually helps them and like have that exclusive right to do those things.
Yes, so that I mean at the core of the question is the level right? It's kind of tricky to answer it because there's an element of empirical analysis. About whether what we're looking at is two things. So copyright, protecting the human rights of the author. That's one thing. The other thing is to say whether the current system encourages innovation, right? And rewards the inventor or the creator of the software, but also creates an economy, a system whereby there is competition, innovation. Okay, I mean the SAS case, the other guy created a software that was pretty much exactly the same, very similar to the original one, and was able to work together with the original system. What's the benefit of allowing that to happen in a market currently? What's the yeah?
It doesn't allow for monopoly.
Yes, so no monopoly. And what's the opposite of a monopoly? Competition, right? So the idea is if you don't protect, if you give too much of an IP right, too much of a strong IP right, the risk is that you could stifle innovation and also presumably the competitor, the software could be cheaper, and so you lower the prices if you are able to have, or even absolutely free, right? And so the idea is, yes, it's good for innovation. It's problematic to give one provider a monopoly on the ideas, on the functionality of a software, because then consumers, whether individuals or companies or state authorities, are they bound to buy this software if they want to have those functionalities. So there's a risk there. Now what's the flip side of that? So that's the argument saying we don't need too much IP protection. What's the flip side of that? Yeah?
Well, if you have too little staff, those innovation people are deterred from wanting to create anything, and they'll decide to keep it to themselves.
Yes, they'll innovate less, they will have less revenues, there will be less innovation. The problem is also that if you have, I'm going to see that more in the competition dimension. Let me see, I mention that precisely. Let's say you have a company, which company do you think of when you think about video conferences? Zoom. What's the other company or service app you think when you in your university, especially university and work life, which app will you use to have a meeting with your colleagues? Yeah? Teams, which is Microsoft, right? So Zoom was created 6 or 7 years ago. Microsoft had Skype, but nobody was really using Skype for business, a bit, but not really. COVID happens, everybody using Zoom. Then Microsoft pushes Teams. So, I mean, it's the same idea, right? And you can't protect the idea. You can see the risk is that the competitor, the smaller company, if the big established company can just duplicate the idea, the functionality, then the competitor who is dominant in one aspect of the market can remove or outcompete Zoom. Because I don't use Zoom anymore almost ever, because the university uses Teams and everybody's on Teams, and so for me Zoom is almost non-existent, and when I have to do a meeting with somebody from outside the university, it's really a bother for me to have to download Zoom. And have you heard about Dropbox? Yeah, the same. Dropbox used to be huge 5-6 years ago because they were the only one of the main ones doing that. And now most of the big companies like Google, Microsoft offer a similar service, right? So, and that can't be the idea of having a cloud system where you can manage your documents is not protectable. So, we'll go through that again when we look at competition law. I'll see you next week. There might be, again, a bit of a delay in the handouts for week 4, or session 4, but it should be there by Thursday night. Okay?